After a decade of loyalty, my boss smiled coldly. We're replacing you with someone cheaper. Business, nothing personal. I nodded. Thanks for the notice. What they didn't know. I held the patent on the software they depended on. Next morning, their system shut down. The words hit me like a slap, sharp and cold. For a moment I just sat there staring at the man across the sleek conference table. The man I'd spent 10 years making rich. 10 years of loyalty. 10 years of problem-solving, late nights fixing their mistakes. And this was how it ended. Bradley Carter, CEO of Genova Tech, leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together like he was doing me a favor. His smirk was subtle, but I caught it. The kind of smug expression people wear when they believe they have all the power. We've decided to bring in someone more cost-effective, he continued, his voice smooth, practiced. It's nothing personal, Ava. Just business. I clenched my jaw, forcing my expression into something neutral. It wasn't just business. It was betrayal. A decade of my life, gone with a single sentence. The conference room was silent except for the soft of the city outside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows I could see downtown New York stretching beneath us. Thriving, relentless, a world that never paused. But in that moment it felt like everything had stopped. The board members sat stiffly around the table, avoiding my eyes. Cowards. They couldn't even look at me. I swallowed down the sting of humiliation, keeping my voice even. When does this take effect? Bradley's smirk grew. We'll need you to assist in the transition for the next 2 weeks. Your replacement will shadow you. Get up to speed. After that, we'll finalize your severance package. Shadow me. They wanted me to train the very person taking my place. A sharp bitterness curled in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I nodded once, standing slowly. Thanks for the notice. I didn't wait for a response. I turned, walking toward the door with measured, even steps. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a steady, deliberate rhythm. If they thought I would beg, cry, or plead for my job, they didn't know me at all. As I reached the door, Bradley's voice followed me, casual and dismissive. We appreciate everything you've done, Ava. Really. But change is inevitable. I didn't look back. A decade of loyalty traded for a cheaper model. The elevator ride down felt suffocating. I clenched my fists, breathing in through my nose, trying to suppress the storm of emotions crashing inside me. Vigor, resentment, betrayal. Not just at Bradley but at myself. Forever believing that loyalty meant something in this industry. I had given everything to Genova Tech. I had built their software architecture from the ground up. Every system, every line of code, every efficiency that made them a powerhouse. It was mine, and they were throwing me away for someone cheaper. The doors slid open and I stepped into the bustling lobby. People rushed past me, lost in their own worlds, oblivious to the fact that my world had just shifted. I barely registered, stepping onto the sidewalk, the city air cool against my skin. My thoughts were spinning, replaying every moment, every sacrifice, every night I'd spent hunched over my laptop, fixing last-minute crises that weren't even my fault. And then, like a slow dawn breaking through darkness, a realization crept in. They thought they had won. They thought I would just walk away. They had no idea what I still held in my hands. My fingers curled around my phone, my pulse steady now, controlled, calculated. Genova Tech ran on my software I held the patent for. I had made sure of it years ago. The system they depended on to process millions of dollars in transactions, to manage their entire operation. It wasn't theirs, it was mine. And they had just severed their only connection to it. I inhaled slowly, tilting my face to the sky, letting the realization settle deep into my bones. I had 2 choices. 1, I could fight for my job, beg them to reconsider, play the game on their terms. 2, or I could let them burn themselves to the ground. The second option felt much more appealing. I walked home, my mind already crafting my next steps. No rash decisions, no impulsive moves. I wouldn't lash out in anger. I would let them believe they had won. By tomorrow morning I would revoke their rights to my software. The moment my 2 weeks were up, Genova Tech's entire system would start failing, not through sabotage but legally. They would try to replace me, but they would fail. Because my software wasn't something you could just hand off to a cheaper employee. It was intricate, complex, built with a unique architecture that only I fully understood. I reached my apartment, unlocking the door with steady hands. The space was quiet, dimly lit by the city glow outside. I tossed my coat over a chair, exhaling slowly. The anger was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. It was fuel. I sat down at my desk, opening my laptop. It was time to make my move. They thought they could replace me. They were wrong. As my fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling up legal documents, patent agreements, and contract details, a small smile played at my lips. I wasn't going to destroy them. I was simply going to let them fall apart on their own. Let them see what happens when you take the architect of your success and cast her aside. Tomorrow morning, Bradley Carter would sit in his corner office, sipping his overpriced coffee, feeling smug about replacing me. By the next morning, Geneva Tech would be on its knees, and I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dim apartment, casting sharp shadows on the walls. My fingers moved with quiet precision, pulling up the legal files that had been sitting in my private cloud storage for years. I had never thought I'd need them not like this. But something in me had always known. Insurance was necessary when you worked with men like Bradley Carter. I clicked on the patent document, scanning the lines I had nearly memorized. Ownership of software rights, including all derivative works, remains exclusively with the original creator, unless a transfer agreement has been legally executed. A slow, deliberate breath left my lips. There was no transfer agreement. They had built their empire on my software, and they never even thought to take ownership of it. Arrogance, carelessness, stupidity. It didn't matter which. It only mattered that it was my advantage now. I pulled up the formal revocation request. One click, one submission, and everything they relied on would cease to belong to them. Not yet, I told myself. Not tonight. Tonight I would let them sleep easy. Let them go home, sip their expensive wine, and feel victorious. Tomorrow morning, the real game would begin. I shut my laptop, pushing back from my desk. My mind was buzzing, but my body was drained. 10 years in a company, and just like that, I was nobody to them. The thought should have stung, but all I felt was clarity. They saw me as disposable, but they had no idea that they were the ones skating on thin ice. Without me, they were nothing. I stood, stretching my arms before heading to the kitchen. The city outside filled the silence. The aroma of the coffee I hadn't touched earlier still lingered in the air. I wrapped my fingers around the cool ceramic of the mug, staring at the skyline beyond my window. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. The next morning I woke early, moving through my apartment with quiet purpose. Today was a normal day. A normal morning. If anyone looked at me, they wouldn't see the woman whose entire career had been discarded just 24 hours earlier. They wouldn't see the gears turning behind my calm expression. By the time I arrived at Geneva Tech, the office was already buzzing with activity. I stepped out of the elevator, moving through the familiar rows of workstations, past the glass offices where executives barked orders into Bluetooth headsets. I was greeted with stiff nods, awkward half smiles. People knew. Word spread fast in places like this. No one wanted to be the next name on Bradley Carter's list. I reached my office. No, not mine anymore. I corrected myself as I saw her. The replacement. She sat at my desk, clicking through files on my computer. Her blonde hair was tied back in a sleek ponytail, and she wore the same kind of tailored blazer I had once worn when I believed in this company. I should have felt something: resentment, anger, jealousy. But all I felt was certainty. She wouldn't last here. She wouldn't survive what was coming. The final instruction. Bradley called me into his office before noon. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with that same smug expression he'd worn yesterday. "I assume you'll be professional about this," he said, gesturing toward my replacement. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Of course." He chuckled. "Good. I knew you'd see reason." He didn't know anything. I spent the afternoon walking my replacement through the system. I answered every question, pointed out important files, all while knowing that in less than 24 hours, none of it would matter. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want her to fail. But this wasn't about her. This was about them. The day dragged on. At 5:30 sharp, I packed up the last of my things. A few old notebooks. A framed photo I had forgotten was even there. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed Bradley's office. He was on the phone, laughing, probably celebrating the fact that he had cut costs without a hitch. He had no idea. No idea that the foundation of his company was already cracking beneath him. I stepped into the elevator, letting the doors close. One more night. That's all they had left. At 6 a.m. I logged into my private terminal. The legal request had already been approved. Geneva Tech's license to my software was officially revoked. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Calm, collected, certain. At precisely 8:32 a.m., my phone buzzed. Emergency alert. Internal system failure detected. I smirked. Right on time. By 9:15 a.m., Geneva Tech was in chaos. Bradley's assistant was the first to call. Ava, hi. Listen, we need you to come in. There's a situation. Her voice was rushed, laced with panic. I glanced at the time, smiled. Oh, what kind of situation? Everything's down. The client portals, the internal databases. It says it's a licensing issue, but she stopped, her breath heavy. They said the software isn't ours anymore. That's because it's not. I'm sorry, I said, keeping my voice even. That's really not my problem anymore. I could hear voices in the background. Someone, probably Bradley, was yelling. The assistant sucked in a shaky breath. Look, can you just come in? Maybe we can. I ended the call. I wasn't going back. I had already given them everything. I watched the news unfold from the comfort of my apartment. By noon, Geneva Tech was making headlines. By 2 p.m., investors were pulling out. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, Bradley Carter was scrambling to salvage his empire. Me? I was already building something new. They never saw me coming. I didn't ruin them. I didn't sabotage or hack or break anything. I simply let them fall under the weight of their own arrogance. Tomorrow morning, Bradley Carter would wake up to the remains of the company he thought he could run without me. Me? I would wake up free, with nothing to lose and everything to gain. I leaned back in my chair, coffee in hand, my laptop open in front of me. The chaos was already unfolding, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. The news was everywhere. Tech giant Genova faces major system outage. Clients left in the dark. A slow smile curled at the corner of my lips as I scrolled through the articles. It had only been a few hours, but the panic was spreading fast. Clients were furious. Investors were jumping ship. And I knew exactly what was happening in that glass tower I used to call my office. Bradley Carter was losing control. He thought he could replace me. He thought I was disposable. He was learning the hard way. The first signs of trouble. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Bradley Carter. I let it ring and ring and ring. Then, silence. I could imagine him, his frustration mounting, pacing his office, trying to salvage the mess he created. The IT team would be scrambling, refreshing their screens over and over, trying to fix something that wasn't broken. It was simply no longer theirs. I took a sip of coffee, the rich, bitter taste grounding me. They had no plan, no backup, no contingency, nothing. But as I was the plan, and I was gone. Inside that conference room, I knew exactly how it was playing out. I had been in those meetings before, just never on this side of the disaster. Bradley would be sitting at the head of the table, his hands clenched into fists, his temper barely contained. I need answers. His voice would be sharp, urgent. Why is everything failing? The IT director, probably sweating through his dress shirt, would shift in his seat. Sir, it's not a crash. It's a licensing issue. Bradley would pause, confused. What do you mean? A heavy breath, a reluctant answer. Ava Sinclair revoked our access. Silence. I could almost hear the sharp inhale, see the color draining from Bradley's face as those words sank in. That's his voice would waver before he forced control back into it. That's impossible. We own the software. A longer silence. Then the quiet, fatal words. No, sir, she does. I tapped my fingers against my coffee mug, waiting for the next call. It wouldn't take long. Bradley would be spiraling, his mind scrambling for a way out. He prided himself on control, on being 5 steps ahead. But this time, he never even saw it coming. My software wasn't just a tool, it was the backbone of Geneva Tech. Every client dashboard, every internal process, every security measure, all of it was built on my architecture. No, they had nothing. I refreshed my inbox, more notifications, more alerts. Geneva Tech was bleeding out, and I had only just begun watching. My phone vibrated again, but it wasn't Bradley this time. It was an unknown number. I smirked. The board, they had realized what was happening. Bradley's charm wouldn't save him now. Not when their stock was plunging, their clients were demanding refunds, and every major news outlet was reporting the disaster. I let the call go to voicemail. I already knew what they wanted. They wanted a fix. They wanted me. But I wasn't their employee anymore. I wasn't their safety net. They had made that choice. The ultimate power shift. By mid-afternoon, the full extent of the damage was sinking in. The board was furious. Investors were pulling out. Competitors were poaching clients like vultures circling a dying animal. Another call, another voicemail. This time I listened. "Ava, this is Richard Lyman from the board. We need to discuss a solution. We're hoping to negotiate a way too." I deleted the message before he finished. They weren't hoping to negotiate, they were desperate. I knew it was coming. Bradley's name flashed on my phone again. I let it ring. Then on the fourth try I picked up. "Hello, Bradley." There was silence on the other end, a hesitation, then his voice tight with frustration. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming against my knee. "Do we?" A sharp exhale. "Ava, come on. I know you're upset." I laughed softly. Not the kind of laugh that meant I was amused. The kind that said I wasn't buying his nonsense. "Upset." I repeated, savoring the word. "Bradley, I'm not upset. I'm just watching the inevitable unfold." His breathing was tense on the other end. "You made your point, all right? But we can fix this. You can come back." I cut him off. "Come back." I let the silence hang between us before I spoke again. "You really don't get it, do you?" Bradley said nothing, so I continued. "You thought I was just another name on a payroll?" I said, my voice measured. "You thought you could replace me with someone cheaper. But here we are. And tell me, Bradley, how's that working out for you?" Nothing. Just the sound of his defeat settling in. "Ava." He tried again, but his voice was different now. Quieter. Weaker. "I'll double your salary, triple it, just." I sighed. "Bradley." He stopped. "I don't want your money." I said, my tone final. "I just want you to understand something." Another pause. He needed me, I never needed you. And with that, I hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment, then set it down beside me. I felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse. Just the quiet satisfaction of justice. Genovatech was failing and there was nothing they could do about it. Tomorrow morning, Bradley would wake up to the remains of the company he thought he built. Me. I would wake up free. With nothing to lose and everything to gain. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly. The weight of finality settled over me. Not as an anchor but as a quiet triumph. Genovatech was unraveling thread by thread, and I didn't need to lift a finger. I had done my part. The rest? Gravity would take care of. The city outside my apartment stretched wide and endless, bathed in the golden hues of late afternoon. I stared at it for a moment, then leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms above my head. It was almost poetic, really. They had thrown me away. Now they were drowning without me. The frantic attempts to fix the unfixable. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, my inbox had flooded with desperate emails. Subject: urgent, please respond. Subject: let's talk? Immediate assistance needed. The messages were all the same: empty pleasantries, forced apologies, hollow requests for a conversation. I didn't reply. Said I refreshed the news. Stock drops 37% in a single day as Genovatech faces catastrophic system failure. A soft of satisfaction stirred in my chest. Investors weren't just pulling back, they were running. I scrolled further. CEO Bradley Carter issues statement. "We are working to resolve the situation." I clicked on the link, watching the embedded video load. There he was. Bradley sat stiffly at the press conference table, his shirt slightly wrinkled, something I had never seen before. His jaw was tight, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked defeated. I turned up the volume. "We understand the concerns our clients and investors have," he said, his voice carefully controlled, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "We are working closely with our team to address the technical issues and will provide updates as soon as possible." A reporter's voice cut in, sharp and demanding. "Mr. Carter, is it true that Ava Sinclair, your former head architect, revoked the company's access to the software?" Bradley's jaw twitched. For a moment he didn't speak. Then his fingers tightened around the microphone. "No comment." I smirked. The comment sections were ruthless. "How do you fire the one person who built your company? Looks like someone made a huge mistake. This is why you don't undervalue your employees." Karma at its finest. The backlash wasn't just contained to the media, it was spilling into the real world. Clients were dropping contracts, citing breach of service agreements. Vendors were pulling partnerships, unwilling to associate with an unstable company. And the employees? They were turning on him. Desperate calls and empty apologies. At exactly 7:45 p.m. my phone rang again. I stared at the screen watching Bradley's name flash across it. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then, just as expected, it rang again. This time I answered. Ava. His voice was taut with frustration, but there was something else woven into it, something I had never heard before. Panic. I took my time responding. Bradley. He exhaled the sound sharp and forced. I need to see you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, that's interesting. You didn't seem to need me a few days ago. Pause. I was wrong. The words were clipped, forced from between gritted teeth. Look, Ava, I know you're upset. I laughed, cutting him off. I'm not upset, Bradley. I'm watching you choke on your own arrogance. Silence. He cleared his throat. I'll offer you triple your salary. I'll rewrite your contract. How I'll give you part ownership. Just come back and fix this. I smiled. Bradley, I said slowly, savoring his desperation. You still don't get it, do you? Another silence. You didn't just fire me, I continued. You treated me like I was nothing, like I was disposable, like I wasn't the reason your company thrived. And now you want me back. I know, Bradley. I cut in smoothly. You don't get to undo what you did. You don't get to fix this with money or apologies. This isn't about revenge. I let the words hang, then added, voice calm and even. This is about consequences. I hung up. Legal consequences hit hard. The next morning I woke up to another wave of headlines. Genova Tech faces multi-million-dollar lawsuits as clients demand compensation. Shareholders call for CEO Bradley Carter's resignation amid crisis. I clicked through the articles. The lawsuits were pouring in. Corporate partners claiming contract violations, small businesses citing lost revenue, even individual consumers joining class action suits. The board was in chaos. Investors had completely lost confidence, and now, Bradley's own executives were turning on him. I let out a quiet breath, taking a sip of my coffee. I had never wanted this to turn into a spectacle. But that's the thing about arrogance. Makes people blind to their own destruction. By noon, it was official. The board had forced Bradley Carter out. The same board members who had nodded along as he dismissed me, they had now dismissed him. It was poetic, really. I sat at my desk scrolling through my messages, a flood of job offers, partnership inquiries, invitations from competitors who had been waiting for an opportunity like this. I could start over, build something better, something mine. A soft exhale left my lips. Bradley had thought he was invincible. He had thought he controlled everything. But power isn't just about money, it's about who holds the foundation, and I had always held it. He just realized it too late. I closed my laptop. No more emails, no more calls. Genova Tech was no longer my concern. They had tried to replace me. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had destroyed themselves. Me. I wasn't looking back because the best revenge is simply proving you never needed them to begin with. I closed my laptop with finality, the of the city outside filling the quiet space of my apartment. Genova Tech was no longer my concern. The emails, the calls, the frantic attempts to pull me back into their sinking ship. It was all over. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar, weightless. The past 10 years had been spent chasing deadlines, solving crises, and proving my worth to people who never truly valued it. Now there was no one left to impress, no fires to put out, no boss looming over me with false promises. I was free. And yet, as I stared out at the glowing skyline, another realization settled in. What now? The silence in my apartment was unnerving. No urgent notifications, no meetings to prepare for, no endless cycles of proving myself. It was just me. For years I had defined myself through my work. Ava Sinclair, the architect of Genova Tech's success, the woman who held it all together. But no, I wasn't just the person who took them down. I had to become something else, something more. I reached for my phone, scrolling through the flood of job offers and partnership requests. Competitors, startups, even investment firms. They all wanted me. They had watched the downfall of Genova Tech and saw exactly what I was capable of. But I didn't just want another job. I didn't want to spend another decade building someone else's empire. I wanted my own. The industry takes notice. By morning, the business world had already shifted. The same industry insiders who had once praised Genevitech were now dissecting its downfall. One architect, one decision, the collapse of a giant. How Ava Sinclair outmaneuvered the very company that betrayed her. I wasn't just a former employee, I had become a symbol, the cautionary tale for companies that undervalued their talent. And that was powerful. I stepped out onto my balcony, the crisp morning air biting against my skin. The city stretched out before me, alive with possibilities. I had the leverage, the name, the reputation. Now I just needed a plan. I spent the next few days sketching out ideas, making calls, reaching out to old connections, people I trusted, people who knew what I could do. The idea was simple: build something better. I didn't want another tech firm bloated with bureaucracy and greed. I wanted innovation without the corporate rot. A company that thrived on talent, not exploitation. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. That part was over. No. I wanted to win. The messages from Genevitech didn't stop. Bradley had gone silent, but others weren't giving up so easily. Ava, we can fix this. Name your price. We made a mistake. Let's rebuild together. Each message was another reminder of how quickly power shifts when you realize who actually holds it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their company was in ruins, and I wasn't interested in salvaging it. I had bigger plans. A week later, I walked into the offices of a venture capital firm. A place I once would have been nervous to step into, back when I was just an employee trying to prove my worth. But today, I wasn't here to ask for a job. I was here to launch something of my own. I sat across from the firm's director, a man who had followed my career for years. He leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his gaze. Ava, what's next for you? I smiled. I'm building something new. His expression shifted, interested, intrigued. Tell me more, and so I did. I told him about my vision, about a company that wouldn't just replicate what Genevitech had done, but reinvent the entire industry. About a workplace where talent was valued, where the next generation of architects wouldn't have to fight to be seen. By the time I finished, there was no hesitation. We'll fund you, he said. Whatever you need. I exhaled, slowly shaking his hand. This wasn't just a deal, it was the beginning of something unstoppable. That evening I stood in front of my laptop one last time. I clicked on Genevitech's website, watching as their stock hovered at its lowest point in a decade. The forums were filled with speculation. Would they survive? Would they recover? I already knew the answer. It didn't matter. I closed the tab. Then, without a second thought, I deleted every email, every voicemail, every trace of the company that had once defined me. I wasn't Ava Sinclair, the woman they discarded. I was Ava Sinclair, the woman who had rebuilt herself. And this time, no one would ever take me for granted again. The best revenge is never needing them again. I took one last deep breath before shutting my laptop. The past was done. No. The future was mine to build.